Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Grow with Glow. What I like about these is I get a chance to basically slow things down a little bit and explain some of what I heard after we do these interviews. In other words, some of the things I don't want you to miss. Number one, this is a recap of Misty May-Treanor. She is the three-time Olympic gold medalist and the GOAT of beach volleyball. Part of the reason I say that is she won 3 of those gold medals with her partner, Carrie. And then Carrie went on to play in a 4th Olympics without Misty and wasn't able to win the gold medal. So I think her place in history as the greatest is solidified. And in my opinion, it's partly because of the mental fortitude she brings to the game, the analysis, and a lot of what she shared in that first interview. So if you're jumping in right here, you will certainly learn a ton. However, if you have not yet listened to the interview I did with Misty and hear her in her own words, I would strongly advise you go check out that interview first. This is going to be a quick recap and some things that I want to double click on, but also some things that we didn't mention. In other words, these are some of the secrets behind the scene that I want you to get. Like number one, the reason Misty had an Achilles tendon tear, they think, was in part because she was taking a medication she didn't want to take, and she was forced to take it by the organization. And basically, one of the known side effects of this medication was that athletes and individuals were having major tears of large tendons. The Achilles tendon in her situation, but also patella tendon injuries. And there's actually a class action lawsuit. Now, Misty, being a professional athlete, decided to not participate in that class action lawsuit. And partly a conversation I want to revisit with her as to why that happened. But she knows my disdain for the pharmaceutical companies and my love for natural health and holistic approaches to health. So when this topic came up and she and I were talking about this, it was really apparent there was something more to the story. So the next time I sit down with her, I hope to do it with her husband, Matt Treanor, who's joined me on these podcasts as my co-host. Matt was a professional baseball player for over a decade, played in 2 World Series with the Texas Rangers. Matt Treanor also played for the Kansas City Royals right before they won the World Series. And in part, that was because he finished his career in L.A. playing for the Dodgers. So a great athlete in his own right. Definitely one of my favorite people, and that's why he's my co-host when we do these interviews. But for the first sit down with Misty, we felt it was best I just kind of set the table, give you the background. And you got to hear what you got to hear on that first interview. But please know, there will be a second. What I want to do is kind of point out that some of the gems of that first interview that Misty and I did is maybe for parents who have children that want to play at a collegiate level. In other words, if you have young athletes, 7th, 8th grade, 10th, 11th grade, this might be a good joint podcast to listen to in the sense that it talks a little bit about being versatile when you play at the next level, being willing to pick up other positions to help the team, being willing to increase your IQ of the sport you play, meaning you play defense, but coach wants you to play a little bit of offense. Play it, learn it, understand the strategy. And as Misty said, when you get to that next level, a lot of times they will permanently change your position. And then the choice is yours. Do you want playing time in that new role, or would you rather not play? Some of the things she said that I think are really valuable for young athletes and for parents to have the conversation now is maybe listen to this on the car ride into school. Maybe you're listening to it on the way to the airport because you're going to play in a tournament in a club sport. Maybe you've got a long drive to the next tournament. And understand that what Misty was talking about was really this idea that you've got to stay open and flexible in your roles. You've got to be willing to go in and do the work. And what I love is her philosophy is inside out. The answers are inside and the work is inside. And then externally it will show up, but it is a process that requires patience. And she was really clear about that patience was something that she strives to work on as a mother. But also for athletes, it's inherent that you need to be patient. You need to trust the process. And you also need to lean into the process, which is to say you have the ability to do more things in your off time to improve your skills. So one of the things I did want to bring up is that we will be doing a second podcast together. I'm hoping Matt will join us for that one. Timing with 3 little girls is tough, but Misty and Matt's daughter Malia just won the all-around state championship at the age of 10 in gymnastics. So there's a good possibility we're going to see another Treanor girl in the Olympics, another gold medal around the neck. But that wouldn't be the first time Misty has mentored someone into a gold medal seat. You see, the connection between Sarah Hughes and Misty is one that goes way back. It's one that has a lot of affinity, and Misty has been more than just an idol to her, a poster in the room. Misty has been really a coach to Sarah Hughes, in between coaches, in between clubs, in between competitions. And the affinity goes both ways. Misty really admires her approach off the court, things she does for the sport, her understanding of just, how crazy sports can be. And sometimes it gets political, and not losing yourself in the winning. I'll say that again. Sometimes people lose themselves in the winning. They don't stay humble. They don't stay connected to their purpose. And Sarah Hughes has certainly done that, and it really is reflective of the impact Misty has had on her. So again, if you haven't had a chance to listen to that first podcast, I implore you to do that with your children. There are life lessons that carry into not just middle school and high school, but into the college ranks, and even talking about transfer portals and how easy it is for athletes to leave. Look, if it's unhealthy, by all means, use the transfer portal. But if it's avoidance behavior, and what I mean by avoidance behavior is that if you're running from a scenario that you haven't worked on yet, you haven't looked to fix, you haven't communicated to the coaches, then I think you're missing the life lessons that sport can offer. It's not meant for you to run away from the problems. Sport is a metaphor for life, and it's one of those things that's meant to teach you the lessons. But sometimes they're hard lessons, so you've got to lean into those lessons, and you've got to say what's here. And as Misty described, and I think she recommended, you got to go in to do that work. You've got to go in to do that work. My approach with my children has been, what's the to-do list? What do we have to get to work on? And I've shared this before, but I think it bears repeating. If you are a parent, I send my kids clips all the time. I send them video clips of their performances in their games. And the way it usually works is I send the clips first where they didn't do something right. I send them the bad clips. I send them the bloopers. And then we critique it. And we talk about it, and I give them the hard lessons. And if they're willing to listen and learn in that process, well, then I'll share the highlight clips too, because I've always got a phone in front of my face recording things for that reason. Number one, they're teachable moments. But number two, I know the kids like the Instagram clips and the highlight reels. But let me tell you, I'm a pretty tough critic of their play, and I'm always going to be the teacher first, and then we can do the awards and the celebration. And I advise you to do the same. Be willing to take the video clips where they threw the ball away, they didn't play well, they forced a turnover, they weren't hustling after a mistake, they put their head down. Look, these are things that no matter what level you're at, they're unacceptable. And so if you can point those things out in a loving way, you don't have to be harsh about it, but just say, what do you think you're playing? What do you notice about your posture in this play? Oh, I dropped my head, I was sulking. What do you know about your hustle? Yeah, it's kind of not really happening in this video. Yeah, you're right. There is no hustle, right? It's what we call a double bogey. And for the entrepreneurs, you really can't have a double bogey in business either. It's one bad decision followed by another. A double bogey is two bad shots. Can't have it, right? So clean up the mistakes, learn the lesson after one of those mistakes, and then you come back and you refocus. And really what's cool about Misty, I think, is that connection she has with Sarah Hughes. She is Sarah's mentor. She will be looking after her in Paris, no doubt. And part of the connection, too, is their chiropractic care and their love for chiropractic care. So Misty had her Achilles torn, like I said, as a side effect of a prescription pharmaceutical medication taken as directed. And part of my care with her was actually I started to adjust her ankle in the healing process. And she said, it's not moving. It's really tight. I've done the PT. I said, let me take a look at the joint. We can get it adjusted. And she's fearless. And she also trusts me. And she said, yeah, go for it. And when that thing first moved, it was like a shotgun. I wished I had videoed that because it really moved. And immediately she had more dorsiflexion. It was the ability to do like a deep squat. All of a sudden the ankle wasn't locking her up. And it certainly wasn't coming from the tightness. She had been doing a lot of stretching and PT. So the actual chiropractic adjustment of the ankle opened up the joint for more mobility and increased range of motion immediately. If you know anything about the feet, that's a proprioceptive feedback loop to the brain. What I tell all my patients, and this is great for the chiropractors listening, is the most important thing we do as chiropractors is the afferent loop. It's not so much the output that is measurable and distinct in chiropractic care, because strength and conditioning coaches do a great job with that. Mobility coaches, you have plyometrics, weight trainers. There's things that they do as far as on the track and running and explosive work uphill that would increase output, speed, burst. Chiropractic helps. But there are many other coaches and activities they do for that desired outcome. However, the input to the brain, the afferent loop, is really what's important if you are a chiropractor. And what that means is the proprioceptive feedback from the bottom of feet, from the mobility of the ankle, the proprioceptive receptors in the bottom of the foot telling the brain position sense and where you are in space and the world around you is of major importance. And this is also why athletes after concussions oftentimes have ACL tears, because they don't really know where they are in space and the world around them. And that's what we call proprioception. And if you're just a little bit off, it can matter which muscles turn on and off and where the firing and protection is. And a lot of times there's a 3.7 greater times of ACL tears in likelihood after a concussion in non-contact sports. Meaning there's no collision. They're just running or cutting or moving on the field of play, and nobody hits them and they blow out an ACL. Well, it has a lot to do with the brain input, the afferent loop. And oftentimes that starts in the feet, which is also why fall prevention is such an important topic with the elderly and something that everybody needs to talk about. Look, mobility and ambulation is a direct correlation to longevity. The longer you can move, the more mobility you have, the better feedback into the brain, and the longer you're going to live. A stressed brain shrinks. A performance brain is expanding. And I think what we saw with Misty was very much that performance mindset. I would tell you she carried that into childbirth. I mentioned in the interview she had natural childbirth with Malia. Went through a tough birth, hit transition. Matt was there and they talked it through, and all of a sudden started listening to the internal wisdom of the body, what we call the innate wisdom of the body. And she had her first child naturally. She then had 2 children after that naturally. But what was important about that is they were twins. They had them at the same time. And oftentimes in a traditional medical model, that's discouraged. It's not really frowned upon. They want it more of a controlled scenario. She has the mental fortitude. She's a performance athlete, not just in the sand as a beach volleyball player, but as a mother, as a holistic approach to life with her children and for herself. And for many reasons, I love her for that and things outside of that. But when it also came to taking care of her body naturally and really looking at the approaches of what she could do, she dialed it in. And I think that really deserves some merit as well. One of the things Misty was talking about was her connection to performance. And what I'd like to get into on the next interview is specifics for performance. She was one of the first people I knew that was doing ice baths. She was crawling into a brand new large trash bin, a big trash can basically, like you might put outside for your trash in your home or in the alley for public pickup, right? Huge trash bin. But it was new, brand new and clean. And what she would do is fill it half with water and half with ice. And she would use a little step ladder and climb into a very primitive ice bath going back about 20 years ago. So this is before cryotherapy and cold plunges was popular. She used to do this. And so she was also one of those people that taught me early in my chiropractic career that performance athletes figure things out first. The science sometimes catches up. Sometimes it hasn't yet. So because she was doing that 20 years ago, and I would tell you about 5-6 years ago, there seemed to be a big push and a big splash when it came to cold plunges and at-home cold plunges. And look, I have one. I advocate for it. I think it's great. I understand it activates the brown fat, the adipose tissue. I understand it has tremendous impact on your overall health and your immune system. But Misty figured it out first, and very much on that level, there's going to be some other things we share the next time we sit down. What is her exact routine? What were her exact lead-up workouts? What were the things she did for rest, recovery, the music she liked? The things of that nature is what we'll kind of get into next time. So I implore you, when you see the next Grow with Glow drop, please take a listen. She is phenomenal. I'm honestly hoping that Matt does most of the talking and the questions, not myself, because they're married, but he's also a really good cheerleader for his wife. And just saying, how dominant she was in the sand really comes from her abilities that she had to stick to the plan, to outwork her opponents. And he said she could have been this good in tennis, but she was the player of the year in college twice, #1 player of the year in college, and then decided to become a 36-0 teammate on a national championship team. And I would tell you, as her friend, as much as her chiropractor, that it was her mental approach to the game that became contagious for her teammates. And by the time she was a senior and a captain, that's why they went 36-0, because her mental approach was contagious. And she was all business, and she was 100%, which I think for the young athletes listening, that's the easiest percentage in life. Be 100% into your sport. If you are playing college sports, be 100% a good teammate. She mentioned being injured and still going to practice, because you can listen to the coach and learn the lessons when the sensitivity of your ego is not in play. Man, that's huge. Listen to the coach when it's not about you, so you don't get your feelings hurt. Or better still, when you aren't hurt and you are playing, do the same. Don't have your feelings hurt, because you're willing to listen with open ears and just take the objective information, the facts, and not worry about the subjective, the feelings. Separate facts and feelings. You can become a much better athlete in a short amount of time. So that's my advice to everyone. And as she mentioned, even if you're injured, go to practice. Go and learn the lessons. If you can learn the lessons without the mistakes, that's huge. But I definitely applaud her and appreciate her for sharing the gold medal mothering skills. I believe in meritocracy. Someone who shares the thing and what's the merit behind what they say. Well, a lot of it has to do with what they've accomplished, what they can do in their day-to-day lives. And because she lives it and she shares it, I think she's a great resource to listen to. And again, the next time I sit down with her, and there will be a next, it'll be about her performance habits. It'll be about her strength and training and her mental approach and meditation and everything you want to hear behind the curtain. However, I had to kind of set it up right. At least I feel like this going into the Paris Olympics, because she will be announcing Sarah Hughes, who's been her protege. And Sarah's looked at her like a big sister and a coach. And there's been a really deep connection between the two. Sarah had mentioned starting beach volleyball with the excitement because of someone like Misty. Not someone like Misty. Exactly Misty. And so there's actually a photo of that match she was talking about when she was 8 years old, her first match and tryout. There's a photo of Sarah with Misty, a young 8-year-old Sarah Hughes, and Misty May-Treanor. And now here we are 20 years later. Sarah's going for her first gold medal. Misty will be in the booth calling the matches. It's going to be some magic. It's going to be special. So I want you to clue into that backstory as well. And then my feeling is after the Olympics, we can get into Misty's performance habits, routines, some of her deep dives. Sarah does ice baths and cold plunges as well. And you're going to find a lot of what Misty did, Sarah imitated. She emulated her idol. And I think that's a good one for the younger athletes too. So again, if you're a parent, maybe consider listening to this with your kids. If you're a coach, maybe think about sharing the interview from Misty to your players, because she also talked about the willingness to stick it out, not just enter the transfer portal. She gave some great advice about picking your college or university. Pick a place you want to live. She said no to Stanford because she didn't want to be in Northern California. She didn't see herself at that school. Great education, fine institution. She just didn't see herself there. She wanted the warmer weather. So be aware of that. She was offered a spot on the team at Penn State, pretty far from home, also cold weather. She just said, that's not who I am. So get familiar with the process of picking a school in which it includes this idea that I'm going to live here and enjoy the process, whether sports is part of the equation or not, because coaches have a job to do, and sometimes it requires cuts and making a smaller roster. Coaches sometimes get other job offers and they leave school. So the recruiting coach, maybe not the coach who's there your senior year. And so really what Misty did is she boiled it down to this idea that, hey, pick a school based on the fact you want to live there, you want to study something at that school, and you like to live there, whether there's sports involved or not. And of course, we wish you the very best. We want to prepare you mentally to be an elite athlete, performance athlete. And some of the things we talked about was visualizing the ideal self, visualizing yourself in the process of not just winning the gold and going for the championship, but also this idea that you could really get yourself ready for the next level. So some of the things that I want to do is just kind of share with you that, you know, this idea of these podcasts can really be something that comes from a place of a car ride. It could be something that comes from a place of sharing some time with your children and maybe agreeing on the proper mindset for them, maybe agreeing on the mindset that will serve them best into their future. And one of the coolest things I do want to double click on, I kind of had to remind myself of this, was just the Santa Monica Pier story. Misty in diapers with a beach volleyball, being on the court, with UCLA stars that became NBA stars, and really a deep affinity for her mother, who she lost to breast cancer. And that was a big loss. And possibly we can get into that for the next podcast, but it meant a lot to her, obviously, and a phenomenal athlete. And so her dad took on a bigger role and a bigger presence in her life. But Butch was an Olympic athlete himself, and he's a household name in beach volleyball, and he's just a really cool cat. I think he's 50% Hawaiian, and his nature and his storytelling is something my kids love. They've met him a handful of times in passing, and he's always got a story, and they always leave laughing, and he's always got something funny that they'll talk about weeks later. He's just an impressionable guy with a really big heart, and he wants to help all the athletes he's in touch with. So no wonder he's passed that on to Misty. She wants to help all the beach volleyball athletes. And in doing so, she's now teaching those lessons to her children. And after the Maui fires, she hasn't taken her eye off the possibility of setting up volleyball courts and helping families. And like she said, they raised $10,000 for a family in need. She'll be back there. She'll be back Hawaii. She loves the islands. She will not forget Maui and the devastation that happened there. And I have no doubt her foundation will be giving back really soon. And again, she lives it. She exemplifies it. She does it for her children. And if you have your children watching her, she can do it for your children too. A great role model, a fantastic person, and just a really cool chick. One of my favorite people. Clearly, we've become friends. Matt and I have become friends, and I've had Misty speak at our chiropractic events, our Level Up mentoring events. She's come out and shared these things from the stage. She did that at 2012. She came on stage with me at the California Jam, and we were hitting beach volleyballs into the audience at Cal Jam in 2012 after she'd won the Olympic gold for the third time. And we did podcasts back then. I don't think they even called them podcasts back then, but she did it. She came to our live events and our coaching events, and she even allowed me the rights to write a women's health talk based on her lifestyle. And that was 15 years ago when I was teaching chiropractors how to do health talks. And one of them was a Misty May women's health lecture. Coming off of her third gold medal, here's what she eats, here's how she does her sleep routines, and how important is the routine. She's just been very giving to the chiropractic profession, and also a stellar role model, living by example. So I can't say enough about her. And if you can't tell, I couldn't get enough out of her either, because there's just so much in there. She's deep. She's a really cool person, and she's got wisdom beyond her years. So you will see her again for another podcast, and I'll get my co-host Matt to join me. But please take note of what's going on in the Paris Olympics if you hear this in time. 2024, Sarah Hughes going for the gold medal. Misty was her inspiration. Misty's her idol. Misty has been her greatest mentor, and it will be a really cool moment to see those two celebrating, and it's just what it's all about. So the ultimate teammate, Misty May-Treanor. This was my quick breakdown. The performance in the health side will be our next interview. You don't want to miss it. And to really get a full scope of what she did between her second and third gold medal, the Achilles tendon tear, loss of vertical height, and in her own words, she was 80% winning her third gold. It just shows you how dominant of a force she was. So cheers, everyone. I hope you enjoy this, possibly with your children, and get some life lessons and some family agreements in place, because I know this to be true. When they do go off to college, they will be tested, they will be pushed. And if your athlete, your child doesn't know who they are, they could be susceptible to being pulled off their purpose. And ensure that doesn't happen by really laying down some foundational tenets that you believe are important. And if this podcast helps you out, then I'm glad to be a part of it. Hey, my name is Dr. Brad Glowaki. This is another episode of Grow with Glow. Thanks for joining us.